I used my DNA as a map, and it led me to a life-changing self-discovery journey across the world. I'm Carolina Rizzotto, and for 8 months, I traveled by myself to all the countries I have ancestry from. When I decided to do this project, I was living in the United States, having no idea what my identity was outside of my work. And so learning about my ancestry was an attempt for me to find out who I really was. This project has never been done on YouTube before, so I want to give you all the tips for everything that I wish I knew before traveling so you can learn how to explore your own roots and learn more deeply about who you really are. If this resonates with you, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch all the episodes of my DNA series out now. The first country I visited was Latvia, which is completely different from where I was born and raised in. While Brazilians are extroverted, Latvians are introverted. While Brazilians are loud, Latvians are more discreet. With Latvia being my first stop, having so many cultural differences to where I was from made things a little bit more uncomfortable and definitely showed me that I was gonna have to make an extra effort to build that connection with Latvia. But that's kind of part of the beauty of this journey. Like, you're leaving where you come from to explore a different culture and challenge your reality. So the culture shock was actually beneficial for me. And it made me dig even deeper than I would have in maybe another country I'm more familiar with. So the first thing I did, and the first advice that I would give you, is to go to local museums. Learn about the country's history. Because if you understand where they come from, you're gonna have so much more context to all the cultural differences around you. That is actually the perfect moment to start talking to locals. They're gonna give you a good point of view of what the country is like today, and are also just a great resource for you to ask a lot of questions. Now, I'm a professional interviewer and I love asking people questions, but I am putting together a guide here for my YouTube membership club of all the questions that you should ask when you're on your ancestry trip, so make sure you join so you have access to that. Learning the history and talking to locals allowed me to connect the past with the present. And from there, I really started building a genuine connection with Latvia, which when I first arrived, I thought was gonna be very, very difficult to do. I felt like a complete fish out of water. My next stop was actually a country that is a lot more similar culturally to Brazil because they colonized Brazil, and that country is Portugal. Portugal was like the polar opposite experience of what I had in Latvia because I knew their entire history. We spoke the same language, so it made it a lot easier for me to connect and meet with people. I just felt immediately at home in Portugal. I was just like so happy and connected. What's interesting though is that a lot of Brazilians, they feel a lot of prejudice when they visit Portugal, or especially when they live in Portugal. There's some rivalry still between the two countries due to the colonization times. I think it's all super petty and people need to move on. I didn't listen to what any of these people were saying on either side, and I really, really believe that if you approach any person with genuine curiosity and authenticity and respect, you won't have any problems, okay? At least 90% of the time. All kinds of characters showed up in my journey. It was so cool because it made the experience even more diverse. So yes, there is a massive advantage to traveling to a country that you know how to speak the language. So if you're feeling really insecure, you want to make sure you don't want to miss out on this, human connection side of it, maybe get a local translator to help you or something like that. But honestly, usually everybody speaks a little bit of English, so maybe you'll still be able to communicate. Just throwing some ideas out there. After Portugal, I decided to travel to Spain, which is a country I do not have DNA from, but I was just really curious to check it out. I've always heard so many amazing things about Spain, and because I didn't have DNA from there, I didn't really feel any pressure to discover something specific. I was just like, you know what? I want to have fun a little bit, maybe hang out with people my age, which I hadn't really done much at that point. I stayed in a lot of hostels. I met so many incredible travelers from all over the world, and I had so much fun in Spain, like too much fun in Spain. But I think it's important when you're doing this trip to always make room for spontaneity. You're on this journey to learn about who you are, to connect with yourself, to follow your instincts. And my instincts took me to Spain. I just had this feeling, and nobody gave a crap about what I did for a living. They didn't treat me as an asset. They treated me as a person. And after 8.5 years living in the United States, I was like, what is this? Like, why do these people want to spend time with me? It took me a second to understand. So Spain was a beautiful, unexpected part of the journey that really helped me feel valued. It's actually the first country in the entire trip this far that I felt like, damn, I don't want to leave. You know, I was just having such a good time. I was like, I don't want to go somewhere else. You know, this is too good. Now, when you're traveling this much, it's really important to have the proper insurance so you can have peace of mind and actually enjoy your travel experience. Which is why I'm really happy to today be partnering with Safety Wing, an insurance company built not only for travelers, but digital nomads. You can sign up either before you travel or while you're traveling. Their essential plan has travel medical insurance, which includes hospital stays, medication, and even surgeries. But also, if you want to document your entire journey, maybe even your own DNA trip like me, you'll probably be traveling with your laptop, your video camera, lenses, microphones, and for that, they have another add-on, which is for electronic theft, which only costs about another $20 per month. Their customer service is always available either via live chat or email. Use the link here in my bio to join Safety Wing today. Remember though to read all the details of the plan you're subscribing to make sure that it has everything you need. And hopefully you get to do your own DNA trip very soon. Which reminds me, our next country, Germany, which is completely different from Spain. A lot of people told me not to go to Berlin, specifically Germans told me not to, saying, oh, Berlin is not Germany. I loved Berlin, okay? And I think as I've exposed through this video so far, knowing and learning about the history is so important, and Berlin has so many resources to learn about the history. Try to visit at least 3 different cities per country, with one of them being the capital. And in Germany, I picked Berlin, Cologne, and Munich. 3 different regions of Germany. I do regret a little bit not visiting smaller cities, but since I don't speak any German, I was a bit concerned of not being able to communicate with anybody. So I was like, well, big cities, there are some people that I know in these cities, and I'll be able to speak English, which was an essential part of the process. Each city kind of helped me connect the dots a little bit more and understand German identity. And funny enough, my video about Germany is my most watched of my DNA series so far. Kind of wild. Funny how me, coming from a completely different culture, was able to properly interpret Germany, you know, and make them feel seen and make them feel valued. That was one of the wildest parts about that. So trust your intuition and know that sometimes coming from a perspective that's completely different actually works to your advantage. After Germany, I went to Italy, which is a country I had visited several times before in the past. I had been to Rome before, you know, the capital. I was very well acquainted with the history of Italy. I also knew for the first time the very specific region that my family was from, which was a place called Belluno. It's a city in the northeast with about 35,000 people. Yeah, nobody spoke English there. So I was fully prepared for that. Okay, I already knew that in smaller cities in Italy, just like in many other countries in Europe, people are not going to speak English. I spent about a month studying Italian through ChatGPT, and I was able to pull off interviews for that entire video in Italian. You can use Google Translate. A lot of people will say that. True. That is definitely better than nothing. But what I will say, especially if you want to do this project in film as well, it's so important for you to be fully present with the person. And in smaller towns, people are not used to being filmed. Most of the people I interviewed actually I couldn't even put on camera. I had to film myself or film the floor or whatever was around me. It's so important for you to keep the eye contact so they can feel comfortable to share things about themselves and their culture to a total stranger, because that's what you are. Giving them some context definitely makes them feel safer, or at least write down your questions in the local language. I also did that, especially for my first interviews. That's gonna go a long way. And so you can always record even on a recorder and translate later. Also in Belluno is the one place where I had that magic movie moment that you would expect doing an Ancestry trip like this. I remember I was alone right by this river with a beautiful view behind me. It was me just by myself, and I felt so incredibly connected. It was pure magic, seriously. Now, after Italy, I went to my final stop in Europe, which was Austria. I had been to Austria before as a tourist with my family, and I always thought it was a spectacularly beautiful, civilized country, and my opinion remains the same. But when you go to a country that you've been to before with the intention of learning about your ancestry, the intention makes all the difference in the world. because it's gonna change the way you see things, the way you communicate, the kind of clues that you're looking for. So I knew that my family was originally from the region of Tyrol, which Innsbruck is a part of, and ironically, it is the place where I felt the biggest connection to. Now, did I feel a connection in Tyrol because that's the region my family's from? I don't know. I think it's hard to say. To me, it's just obviously the most beautiful place. But again, this is not an exact science. Just feel whatever you feel, take a note of it, and move on. What I will say though is when I visited Austria, I was already, traveling for like 5 or 6 months. I had reached quite an insane level of exhaustion from traveling, filming, planning, editing full time. And I was trying at the time to post the videos of my journey simultaneously. So when I was in Austria, I really didn't do as much research or talk to as many locals as I would have liked. As I said, like that's where you find the answers. And so I already had the formula. I kind of broke it because I was exhausted. You're constantly changing countries, cultures, languages, having to learn over and over the history, the customs, constantly adapting yourself, sometimes big shifts in weather as well. Remember to have some days that you can just give yourself the luxury to do nothing. Otherwise, you might miss out on opportunities like I did. Now, the final stop on my trip was Brazil, the country I was born and raised in. And I decided to split this trip into 2 parts. In one, I visited the states my family originally came from, which were Bahia, Alagoas, and Rio Grande do Sul. And on the other, I visited the state that I was born and raised in, Rio de Janeiro. The budget was limited at this point, guys, so remember to plan financially before going on this journey. Definitely one of the reasons that I was able to afford it is because it was cheaper to travel alone than to live in New York City, which is insane, but it's true. And I stayed in a lot of hostels that really made the trip so much more affordable. So plan yourself financially to make sure that you can cover ground and do everything you need to. But because I was filming, I always needed some extra time than maybe you would need if you're not filming. But you might be asking yourself, like, what's the point of traveling through the country that I was born and raised in? Like, what am I gonna learn about my ancestry from there? Here we go back to what I mentioned before about intention. Your intention exploring your own country now is to look into your roots, look into where your family comes from. And actually, this part of the trip, exploring Brazil, is the only part that I did with my parents, which gave a completely different dynamic to this. Now I was able to accompany them, see their reactions, how they felt. Even though I love that I traveled most of the time completely by myself, because then the only opinion that matters is, your opinion. And I think when you're going through, a self-discovery trip, that's really important, that you're doing things for yourself and not for other people. But honestly, the part of the trip that surprised me the most wasn't even visiting the states that I had never been to before. It was visiting Rio de Janeiro. I just fell in love with my city again. And watching back the videos from that trip, I did see this inner light come back into my eyes. The light that I hadn't seen in God knows how long, It's been such an intense journey living in the United States. I'm so grateful for everything I've learned, but it was very, very draining. After, living in the United States and exploring all the countries I have DNA from and coming back home, it just gave me a completely different perspective about who I was and what I value about who I am. My core, I think it's Brazilian. Even though I've changed a lot and I've lived a way more atypical life than anybody I've ever met here, so that definitely, makes more room for you to feel a little bit like an outsider, when people don't understand your experience. But I just felt so comfortable with the energy, with knowing how things work, how to interact with people, how to get a smile from a stranger. Like all these little daily things that make you feel at home. I don't know. I don't think everybody necessarily feels such a deep connection to their hometown, but I do think it's the thing that impacts us the most, because in the end, it's the place we grew up in, the place we learned how to speak, where we had our first memories, where we felt all sorts of emotions for the first time. That's where our existence started. So even though our DNA can give us so much direction and so many clues about who we are and where we come from, I do think that the place we're born and raised in shapes us in a way that creates a bond that's impossible to break. Who you are, is it your DNA, is it not? I don't think it really matters. What matters is that you're always giving yourself the opportunity to question your reality and to define who you are for yourself. and understand that being born in a society and in a culture, everyone's gonna be constantly trying to push their beliefs and their opinions of what your life should be like on you. But for us to become our most authentic selves, which I believe is what is, each of our missions on this planet, we have to step into the unknown. We have to be willing to question our reality and to question the people around us, and most importantly, to question ourselves. When you don't know what you don't know, it makes it very hard for you to question things, which is why I encourage you, as the big conclusion of this whole experience is try something new. Do something you've never considered doing before and see what you learn. Because when you put yourself in situations of contrast, you make room for new possibilities and new opinions to form. And learning things and discovering new things is so magical, because then suddenly you're tapping into a new emotion you didn't even expect, and you're like, wow, what was that? And I'm just respecting the process. I don't have all the answers whatsoever, but I'm willing to ask questions. If you want to watch my entire DNA series, country by country, it's out right now in full, all 8 episodes on my YouTube channel. Each episode is going to give you even more in-depth information about everything I talked about today. And also on my YouTube membership club, you can access deleted scenes and even more exclusive content. And I'm really excited also to get to know you better and even more deeply in that community. I'm Carolina Rizzotto. Remember to like this video and to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And most importantly, to be authentic.